Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of the Parvat Manthan Podcast. I am Tanya Ahmed here with my colleague Anant Mitra, and we're going to be moderating today's episode. So today's episode is titled Unveiling Urbanization in the Hills, What's Next? So we're going to be primarily talking about how urbanization has taken place in the hill-specific context. So for today's episode, we have with us two very celebrated academicians. We have Dr. Nisar and Mr. Intekhab Alam, and they come from an architecture and urbanism background, and they teach graduate and postgraduate students in Delhi. So over to you. Would you like to please introduce yourselves and what piqued your interest into this field?
So, I'm a professor of architecture at Chandigarh. I've been teaching there for about 17-18 years. And what makes me teach is something that, we get to learn as well. So teaching is a very interesting discipline. It makes you learn simultaneously. I think that's the most important aspect that I love about my profession. And so back at my institute, we specifically have taken up few exercises and theses on hills, which is the topic for today. So we have studied the Kangra region, Dehradun region. We have studied Mussoorie. We have studied Leh, I think twice. We have studied Darjeeling, Shillong. We have also studied Western Ghats. So not just Himalayan, but also the Western Ghats. So the program called Masters in Urban Regeneration, which is something slightly unique. So through this program, we try to remove the silos that exist between, let's say, urban planning, urban design, and landscape architecture. They have their own specializations, but we realize that there are these silos that exist between these disciplines, and we thought that we should bridge, this thing, and this is what we largely aim through this program. So this is something.
What about you, Intekhab, sir?
Okay, so I'm an architect by profession, and I did my post-graduation in urban regeneration. So I'm an urban regeneration specialist, and for the past 6 years, I have been working as well with my firm, which is in Mara, and simultaneously teaching as well. So my teaching is something which is whatever I learned from the field, whatever I work, I try to inculcate those things in my teaching as well. We had been working in Ladakh for quite a time. Back in 2018, we started working there. And from my relationship with the mountains started with that. But before that, in 2014, we had worked quite a bit in Kashmir and Ladakh after the disaster. So we were making schools there, like schools which were disrupted by the floods. And that time, actually, I started engaging with the practices and with understanding of how it works and how it is different from other areas. And I think these are the times when actually floods also started happening in these areas. Disasters started happening in these areas. So with the practice, our architecture and urbanism practice, we had been working both in the domain of architecture, and also we do work with the informal settlements in Delhi and in Mumbai.
I think how Tanya introduced the particular topic, I think urbanization in general is a concept that most of us might be familiar with, and many of us might not be familiar with, but we are somewhere a product of it. And we're looking forward to this episode where we would like to break this term down. It seems like a rather small term, but it may have larger implications to society. We're looking forward to breaking that down for us. But you just mentioned about your extensive experience in the Indian Himalayan range. And for me, a person who's living in a city holds an importance. It holds people, it's an economic hub as well. Compared to cities in the plain region, when it comes to the Indian Himalayan region, in terms of the states or the cities that are present there, why and how are they different from an ecological point of view compared to the cities? Like, why should we perhaps give them special attention?
Okay, I think we as a nation, we are blessed with this entire Himalayan range, which has parts in Pakistan and Nepal, but a major chunk of it is in India as well. And a major chunk of cities as well are now being urbanized in these areas. So it becomes all the more important to understand them, to understand the sensitivity through which it should be seen. These regions, they are like within these regions also there are differences. I can say that. For example, like if I see Ladakh as a region, and it is also in the Himalayan region versus what we see in Uttarakhand. They both are in the Himalayan, but within them also it is they both are
very different character,
and they need to be seen from that perspective. Urbanization, which is happening in Shimla, and urbanization which is happening in Leh right now, they need to be seen from two different angles. And unfortunately, we haven't been successful in implementing those master plans or those strategies, which needs to be told in these regions. So I think there needs to be a sensitivity towards these logically sensitive cities.
If I may ask why, so like you said that Leh and Shimla needs to be looked at separately, like because of sensitivities. Like, could you just tell us a little more about what do you mean by sensitivities?
Okay, the answer to why is many, but what is coming to my mind right now is actually whatever. When I say ecologically sensitive area, so it is a very fragile area, which means that whatever small or big thing will happen in this Himalayan region, the impact would be like larger. And also the scale of Himalayas are also like quite big. So whatever happens in these regions, the impact will come to, like, of course they will come to the cities as well, which are in the bottom in the other areas as well. It's not that only the region which is being affected will have the issues. And we are seeing that, in terms of the flooding that has the recent phenomena of flooding and other landslides in other areas, what happened in Wayanad, what is happening in India. So all this is there are many other reasons for it, but I think this sensitivity towards planning and development is something that we need to bring while designing these areas. And this cannot be designed in a way that like Delhi has been designed or like other cities have been designed. There needs to be a different viewpoint to design.
Nisar, so what's your take on this?
I think I'll use the example of the city of Chandigarh. Understand this and to try to point. So when this search for the site for the new city, new capital city of Punjab was happening soon after independence, the site chosen was very close to the Shivaliks. So it's almost, on the foothills of the Shivaliks. This tells us the fact that, it was deliberately chosen closer to the hills, but not exactly on the hills. Easily, a site closer to Kalka could have been chosen, or closer to Shimla could have been chosen, because Shimla has remained our summer capital during British time as well. But the reason why a site closer to the hills but in the plains was chosen, because hills are very difficult to urbanize. And this is something which is, we don't need a science or rocket science to understand this. It's largely because of the topography there. And in particular case of Himalayas, because Himalayas are the youngest mountains on the planet, they are very, very fragile. They have not stabilized as of yet. So when we look at the urban settlements in hills, let's say Shimla, or let's say Darjeeling, Gangtok, or these, we should look at them from the fact that they should not be they should not go into unchecked urbanization. Because hills cannot support uncontrolled urbanization as it is happening in our plains. Something that we understand as sprawl is very much happening in our urban settlements in plains.
What is sprawl?
So sprawl is when a city or another settlement it starts expanding. And again, I'll take the example of Chandigarh, and it's a very interesting case because when Le Corbusier planned Chandigarh, he considered or he planned it for a finite size of population, which was 1 million, and a finite geographical size as well, which was 8 kilometers per 8 kilometers. And he was of the very strong opinion that this city should not grow beyond this size, as in both in a planned manner or in an unplanned manner. Now, in fact, there is this one very interesting incident when some defense facility was supposedly planned to be constructed north of the city. Le Corbusier intervened to an extent that he wrote a letter to Jawaharlal Nehru, and he ensured that this facility is not constructed. So there was this idea that a city should have a finite size, a peak population, which we can also say the carrying capacity of the city, and then it should not grow beyond it, because when it grows beyond it, it actually impacts the environment. So it consumes the surroundings, which are largely ecologically important, significant, which could be agricultural areas where the food security lies and all that. But despite having this idea and despite getting a law enacted, which is called the Chandigarh Periphery Act, where 8 kilometers initially and later on 16 kilometers was declared as no construction zone, buffer zone around the city. Panchkula and Mohali came up. Now it is called Tri-City. And they are basically, if you ask me, Mohali is exactly the sprawl of Chandigarh. It's in a planned manner, but it's a sprawl. But now if you look at it, you will see there are too many unplanned extensions happening to this Tri-City as well. To Zirakpur and in the east, and then towards Shimla, towards Ropar. There is this unplanned growth which is happening. Now, this is something which we understand as sprawl, and sprawl has its own impact on environment.
I want to break down this term urbanization. Bookish knowledge mein nahi, but both of you are academicians in the field of the subject. But if you can break it down for us, what exactly is urbanization? Because the past few days, I have been wondering, how do you exactly define it? Is there a metric based on which you say, okay, now this is urban and this is not urban? On those terms, if there is a metric, we'd like to understand that. But also, when we visit a place, we do get a sense of understanding as well, that this looks urban or this does not look urban. So how would you define it? Nisar, so you start with your definition and then we'll go to the
So, in very simpler terms, urbanization is the process of making cities or becoming cities. So, that's the very basic definition in a very simple language. But what you asked is a very, very interesting question. So sometimes it happens that you are visiting a village in the Indo-Gangetic Plains. Why I'm saying Indo-Gangetic Plains? Because this is the cradle of habitation if we talk about India, Indus Valley civilization and the extension of that. Now, if you visit any of the villages nowadays, you will not find the characteristics of rurality present. It's very much becoming urban in the sense that you will find the houses to be pakka. They have air conditioners now increasingly. You will find people using vehicles, cars, and so they are quickly adopting to the urban life. Although, as per the matrix, as you said, it might still be designated as a village because it has still not qualified the criteria to be declared as urban. which is vested with a certain size of the population and the occupation which has to be non-agriculture. So the thing is that sometimes, as per rules, a settlement may be rural despite acquiring majority of the characteristics of being urban. And a contradiction also exists, like vice versa. So sometimes it happens that a settlement is considered urban, but it is still very small in the population. So if you look at the hills particularly, which is what we are discussing today, we will be surprised to see that there are settlements which are as small as the villages of the plains, but they are called towns. So this size and understanding whether a settlement is urban or rural, it is also contextual. So when we are talking about the Gangetic Plains, where the sizes of settlements are bigger, the understanding of what rural and what is urban is different from the settlements which are in the hills. So in hills, villages are typically a cluster of 4, 5, 6 houses sometimes. That's all. And anything which has a market is considered as a town, despite the fact that it might have a population of only 500 or 100.
That's right.
So it's like a very different understanding. But we know that as per the census, it has to have a certain population engaging in non-agricultural occupation, which entitles it to become urban.
Absolutely.
So, when we were, I think, it's interesting, to maybe streamline this, because when we were studying about urbanization, urban regeneration, so there is a very specific, definitions of what is urban, what is rural, what is town. When does a town becomes city? When does a city, it becomes metropolitan? But as Nisar sir has mentioned, these are again very subjective, and again, because we are talking about hill cities, and it's very subjective to these areas as well, because many of the towns in these areas, they are in their own regard, they are towns and they are cities. But if you see the census or the formal or the format in which these are placed, they are still very vague in definition. For example, there is one more definition about urbanization, or a place being urban is the amount of people engaged in agricultural activities in those areas. And you find that this is again very different. In more than 70% of the people are engaged in agricultural activities, and it is not considered as urban. But again, this is and also because the fact that these all standard protocols and standards, and in a country like India, where you have so much diverse kind of cities, so much diverse kind of topography, it becomes very difficult and strange sometimes to quantify or to tell this is urban, this is not urban, this is rural. So that's coming to if I can give you example of Leh as well. Leh, if you see the population of Leh right now, it's very interesting. I was recently there, and I could see that the local population of that area is still only not more than I would say 60s, 70,000 of that area. But what has happened is that there has been a lot of people who have come to that area from outside Leh, who have come in search for work, and because there's work opportunity as well over there because of tourism, and I could see that the population right now of the people who are coming from outside is more than the local population, not more than, but triple times the local population there. So I think this category of understanding does not fit the format of calling a town or a city does not fit to hill areas. Because the sensitivity or the fragile nature of these cities, they do not allow that much amount of people to come over there, though they are cities. And just again going back to Leh, it is not that it is recently been a city, and the definition again of cities is very different. There was one point of time where Leh has been a very active trade center, and it is called more than 7 languages would be spoken inside Leh market. Okay, so if I can compare, it would be what exactly New York is right now. At one point of time, Leh has that character, but still it did not hold a lot of people. The value was there, but the character was something else. So I think this definitions that they also have somehow, I think, evaded the principles and the values with which these cities should be.
Right. I feel like so somewhere urbanization or urban automatically holds a positive connotation to it, the word itself. It could be somehow, for my case, it resonates with modern, developed, and it almost sounds like a solution to a lot of the problems. However, how I am now learning about it is that it might actually hold a lot of our problems as well. So how do you define this is crossing the line in terms of urbanization, and now we are getting into perhaps unsustainable urbanization of spaces in the Indian Himalayan region? So how do you know that this is optimum, and beyond this you're exhausting the space?
So as far as the Indian Himalayan region is concerned, I think the biggest constraint comes from the topography. So if we look at any of the, let's talk about Manali for example. It's a very famous tourist destination, and I think thousands of people go there during summers, and it's quite big in size for that matter. But if you look at the old Manali, which is located somewhere in the center of the settlement, is not even visited by tourists, not many people even know about it. We understand how big the original settlement was. So the old laydown tells us the size of a settlement, which was the natural size that could have been there, and that should have been there. And it is also evident from the floods that happened last year, when all this extension or sprawl of Manali was washed away, and not the old town. So in when we talk about hills in particular, one thing that is something which we should be very very sure about, that in hills you cannot go with the sprawl model of urbanization. Hills have a finite land which can be urbanized only, and if you go in a sprawl fashion like Shimla, and something I call as Shimlafication, it's bound to face disaster one day or another. So what happened, even if we look at Shimla, it was settled on a ridge, and down the slope there were a few markets, and that's all. But if you go now and if you look at it, you'll be surprised to see that the entire, not even an inch of land is available, or which is not which is not being occupied by hotels or one structure related to tourist industry. So this is something which is totally unstable or unsustainable when we talk about settlements in hills. So I think in hills we cannot. We have to be very careful how big we build, how big we actually construct. And even the example of Leh, as Intekhab was mentioned, the old town Leh is a pretty small settlement. It's not a very big settlement, and that was the size of the settlement, which was considered good enough to act as a market, to act as a residential area, even to defend the attack of the enemy during the medieval times. But now, if you go see, it has been extended all the way to the Choglam Sir and whatnot.
Is it like 10 times bigger?
At least 10 times bigger. It has become kind of something else entirely. And it's not a surprise that in 2010, when flash floods occurred, only the sprawl was impacted. So only the sprawl was the area which was washed away by the flash floods or was impacted. Old town was more or less not impacted. So I think we can safely understand from this that if we keep extending our towns or cities in the hills, we are inviting a lot of trouble. So because hills cannot support sprawl the way plains are. Even plains are experiencing a lot of pressure, and and environmental imbalance, unsustainability. There's some pollutions and urban flooding and whatnot. But hills, we have to be very, very careful.
I think this brings to mind something that we also studied in architecture and urban studies. There's something called habitable and non-habitable slopes, which is actually what comes into play here, that there are only certain areas where you can build a settlement and certain parts where you should not, ideally. So given that, with the conversation we've had so far, do you think it's now high time that we let go of this one size or one definition that is supposed to fit all of these places, and perhaps start differentiating between even definitions of urbanization for the hills and for the plains? Would you like to give some inputs on that? If there is a way you were to define how would you contextualize these definitions for the hills?
I think both the things that you have mentioned over here, itself, gives the answer. Like, for example, when you're talking about slopes and where to build, where not to build, there has been a lot of understanding and traditional wisdom that has been there, with the people. And my learnings, in hill areas, has been if you talk to any of the locals, they know how to build. They know where to build. They know how much time it will take for a house to be built. And house making, I'm starting with house making because it's the smallest unit, where the construction happens. It's never been, something that has to be done by an architect or the contractor will do it. House making in the hill areas especially and in the rural areas, it has been a community initiative or community work that everyone would engage in making that particular thing. But what you are mentioning about where to build is something I think again very contextual to different areas. For example, coming back to Leh again, if you see the topography or if you have see the visuals of it, it's mostly brown and deserted areas. But a few patches of it would be green, and those patches of it are the most crucial or the most valued areas, because those areas are the ones where agriculture would happen. What Nisar also mentioned, if you see the old town of Leh as well, it is not built on those green areas. Or if you have that notion that the settlements have to be near the water body, and so it's not like that. The Indus is little far away from that area, and the reason why they chose the foothills of the hill was because they wanted to spare that land for agriculture purpose, which is unfortunately being the area where most majority of the urbanization is happening, because it's green, tourists they would want to come, and nice views are there, people would want to live there. But again, coming back to what you were saying, I think there's no one solution fitting everything, and the traditional wisdom needs to be documented, and it needs to be it needs to be documented in a manner that each and every place should hold what exactly we need to learn from these people. I would not say we are experts, in how these houses should be made and how these cities should be made, but we need to learn from them and maybe apply, maybe work and apply our principles, in those regions.
It makes sense, because these people have been living there for so long. They know how to adapt to the place and perhaps build in accordance with it. But what we see now is, starkly in the opposite direction now, that there's a lot of concretization that's been happening there as well. So that's that. Nisar, what's your take on this?
I'll say that, this is happening because a lot of it is actually carried out by people from the plains. So even if it's a master plan or a plan being prepared for a hill town or city, it is usually being done by a planner who's been educated in plains and is deputed there and working there. Or many a times even the unplanned development that is happening in the hill settlements, it is by the people who are constructing hotels or tourist amenities. but they belong to the plains. And their understanding of hills is very different from people who have been living there for generations. So I'll give you an example again from Leh. In this flash floods of 2010, I happened to go there in 2011 to witness what happened. And I came to know one very interesting fact about the people there, that people had a kind of a rule or a saying, an oral tradition, as we can call it, that do not build your house under the shadow of two mountains. Something like that. Now, this is an oral tradition, it's not documented anywhere. So I thought that what does it mean? So it simply means that if you have two mountains, the water of the rain will get accumulated between the valley of these two mountains, and if it breaches, it's going to wash away everything beneath it. So this was the rule or a kind of word of wisdom which was prevalent there. And when this small thing happened, when people started building their houses outside, or even the people who were not natives, they started settling down, they did not consider this thing at all, or they were not even aware perhaps of what. And these were the areas which were affected. Now, this is something which is happening very commonly in our hill settlements. For example, Solan is becoming an industrial hill town. Shimla is becoming a tourist. It has already become a big tourist place. There are places which are being urbanized by army cantonments. So army is actually constructing cantonments, and for them, I don't know how much of the considerations towards these local wisdom they give. So, but in any case, if a cantonment comes in an area, it causes the urbanization to start. So other people also come and start settling down there in order to provide them with facilities. Chai ka thiya aa jayega, is tarah se kuch khane lag jayega. So the thing is that, when it comes to hills, I think we have to understand how these people used to develop things over a period of time. So what was their understanding about where to build and how to build?
Right.
This is entirely missing from our understanding, and we, honestly speaking, we look at the hills as a flat surface.
That's true.
So when it comes to making master plans or plans, I don't know how much of topographical understanding we could perceive. So I have this very interesting anecdote to share. We have a colleague called Noman who comes from Dehradun.
Okay.
And so whenever we walk here in Delhi, so he used to sometimes say, "Niche jana hai." Yeah, he used to say, "Acha, upar jate hain." And I was like, "Yaar, ye सामने आगे जाते हैं, पीछे जाते हैं. This is how it has to be. ऊपर नीचे का क्या मतलब है? The point is that he was able to decipher even the slightest slope in the road or in the path we were taking, because he has this vision in him. But he could see that this road is actually sloping down, or this is sloping up, which we could not actually see. So for us, it's a flat. So the point is that we are making this mistake that when we planes and we start making our hotels, for me it doesn't matter whether it's a fragile slope or it is an ecologically sensitive slope or it has a water body running through. For me, it's a plot of land and which I can build a hotel and make money on.
Right.
So I think this is a problem, and we have to kind of treat the towns in a very different manner.
We were talking about practices, or if I may rephrase, indigenous practices, in the sense that the local community has a good understanding of the capacity or ways of developing that particular geographical area. However, we might be lacking that in today's state. Not too long ago, we did have hill stations in, let's say, Darjeeling. Recently been there, so I was wondering about that area. It seems to be a very strategic area that was selected, for the British era. And are there reasons why hill stations that were there during the British era were actually present where they were? Is there a strategic reason for that? Did they have a better understanding? Did the community come together to identify areas along that landscape where potential cities. I'm not an architect and I'm not an urban planner either, but pardon me for not being able to use the right word probably. But is there a way that one can identify we can inhabit this area and we can, in terms of hill stations, how was it done?
So, I think British people introduced us with this idea of having hill stations. And they had, I think, 2-3 major concerns when it came to making hill stations. And one of the major concerns was escaping the heat of the plains during summers. So that was one of the major concerns. And now when it came to identifying a site for making a retreat, a summer retreat basically, the idea is that it should not be very far. So it should be reachable within a day's time or so, given the transportation of that time. So it should not take you 2-3 days to reach. So it should not be very far, and it should be also not very cold. So they did not want to go to the central Himalayan range. They wanted to stay in the lower Himalayan range, where temperature does not go. It's not freezing cold. It's not snow and all that. So this was the consideration from the climatic point of view. The other consideration was that they wanted to use these stations also as trade posts. So British people, they used to do trading from the using the timber in the hills. Timber they used to harvest, and even many other things. And for that, they required a trade post. So usually the sites that they selected for their settlements were already located on existing trade routes. And in many cases, it was, in fact, through our Shillong studio, we realized that, that there were already small settlements or markets present where they actually developed their hill stations. So in the case of Shillong, we came to know that there was already a small market settlement located, and they used that site only, and they established Shillong as a hill station. And in fact, the site where the market was located grew and became CBD of the settlement area.
What is CBD?
Central business, basically the main market area, main commercial area of Shillong.
Yes.
So trade was another consideration for them. Administering hills was also a consideration. So a lot of these, they established a lot of cantonment settlements in hills, which were primarily cantonment sites where their army used to be stationed. Also the administrative settlements. So Shimla, we know, it used to be the summer capital for the government. So administration was another reason. And one of the reasons was to establish educational settlements. So places where their children could be educated. So a lot of good boarding schools are located in hills. So that, I think these were the 4 major reasons. And strategically speaking, when you combine these reasons, you have to find a site which meets, all of these considerations largely. So they were ideally located on the trade routes. They were easily accessible in the sense that, it used to take a day or 6 hours, 8 hours to reach there, not more than that. Back then, now what can reach 2-3 hours and 3-4 hours or so. They could provide as a base for the trade and for the army. Those were the considerations. One thing that is very interesting about their settlements is that almost all their hill stations are located on the ridge. So they chose a ridge, not the slope, to settle down or to make their hill stations.
Without exception?
No, there could be exceptions, but mostly. So if you take example of Darjeeling, it's on a ridge. If you take an example of Shimla, it's also on a ridge. Nainital is not, it's along the lake, but mostly, and the idea was because ridges were considered safer from floods or other things, and then these ridges were used to make what we all know as mall road in patients. So with market on each side and all that. There used to be some settlements on the lower slopes as well, but they were largely meant for carrying out wholesale activities, sabzi mandi, those things, and were inhabited by mostly Indians. Yes. So, but largely the idea was to settle down on the ridge because it is safer, it has good views. You can see the sunrise, sunset. You can enjoy the views of the other peaks and all that. So I think that was largely how they actually planned hill towns and these settlements.
Would you like to add anything to this? If I was missing out something.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would like to highlight over here is that and this is again thing of research that between the Britishers, because Britishers, the way they have developed hill cities, it's very interesting to note the pattern in how these hill cities had been developed. And also the fact that there was one thing that was considered in all these cities was it was not the scale was not huge. Like as I mentioned that though Shimla was the capital, the summer capital, but if you see the scale of Shimla at that time when it was developed, it was not very planned in scale. And
how big was it?
As big as a mall, I can say that. So this particular concept of a mall road is very interesting because again this is a pattern you will find in all these British developed hill stations, and the mall road would have everything from a church to the library to the cafe and to the administration offices. Everything would be within that stretch. So I think this consideration of how big the settlement should be and this sensitivity for how much confined it should be. So it was very interesting to see in these areas, and also because it was a ridge, so it was difficult for them to grow in a sprawl in some other areas. So that has been interesting. For this hill stations in British.
You particularly, I'd like to ask, so we're talking about British hill stations, but since you had working experience in Leh, and from what we know, Leh was completely landlocked, it wasn't open to the general public to visit. So how would you say that Leh came to be known as the Leh we know today? What is the story behind that?
Okay, I think this might be a very long story where we might say
we're all here.
Another podcast story. But in short, what I will try to say, ले के बारे में एक चीज बोली जाती है, या तो आप बहुत घने दुश्मन हो या बहुत पक्के दोस्त हो, आप तभी आओगे लद्दाख। इस एरिया के बारे में ऐसा बोला जाता है।
मैं तो कभी नहीं गया अभी तक। I got to pick one of the two.
तो इसके एक्चुअली में रियलिटी ये थी कि वो हमेशा से ही एक बहुत एक्सट्रीम वेदर कंडीशन वाला एरिया रहता है, और अभी जो हम लद्दाख देख रहे हैं वो एक बहुत अलग पर्सपेक्टिव है, बिकॉज ट्रांसपोर्टेशन आसान हो गया है, एयरपोर्ट आ चुका है, रोड्स पहुंच चुकी हैं, इसीलिए हम आसानी से वहाँ पहुंच पाते हैं। वरना ले तक पहुंचना was also like from this region was always like very difficult. Like लोगों को बहुत टाइम लगता था, समय लगते थे, काफी लोग मर भी जाते थे पहुंचते। तो ये इसीलिए और इसीलिए बोला जाता था कि या तो बहुत आप गहरे दोस्त हो तभी आओगे, या तो दुश्मनी आपकी है तभी आओगे। इसी रीजन के बारे में बताया जाता है। Britishers also did not went and develop that area because, as I mentioned, it was again a very extreme, like in the ranges of Himalaya, where you have extreme cold also and extreme heat as well. Right. So there had been many travelers who had been there in Ladakh. Many travelers would come because from Germany, from Australia, from other areas, they had come and documented, and you would see like photographs. Old photographs in Ladakh, it's well documented area, like the market area, the old town area, काफी अच्छे से document किया हुआ है। और ये जो इसकी जो कहानी है वो वहाँ से शुरू होती है, लेकिन अब जो उसकी कहानी है वो इसलिए वो 2010 से ऐसी चेंज हुई कि एक मूवी आई 3 Idiots के नाम से, एंड उसकी वजह से काफी टूरिज्म वहाँ पे बढ़ा। अच्छा, ऐसा नहीं है कि टूरिज्म वहाँ पे पहले नहीं होता था, टूरिज्म था वहाँ पे, बट mostly people would come for long-term tourism, like in the sense long-term stay duration in that area. So foreigners would come, they would stay in the homestay जो वहाँ पे होते हैं, वहाँ पे they would stay. They would want to learn the culture. They would adapt to that place. They would eat what the local Ladakhis are eating. They would like in a way they would adapt all the lifestyles that people would have in that region. तो उसकी वजह से वो जो मतलब 1970s के जो 1970s में जो खुला वहाँ पे टूरिज्म, उसके बाद में टूरिस्ट जो है वो बहुत ही कम होते थे नंबर्स में, बट काफी सेंसिटिव टूरिस्ट वहाँ पे पहुंचे। 2010 के बाद में ऐसा हुआ कि टूरिज्म बढ़ा वहाँ पे और बहुत लोग आने लगे वहाँ पे, एंड उसकी वजह से होटल्स बनने बहुत शुरू हो गए। अच्छा, एक चीज ले के लिए खास ये है कि अगर आप लद्दाख जाते हैं तो आपको एक दिन के लिए इन्वेस्ट करना होगा। जब आप जाएंगे आप देखेंगे वहाँ पे कि आपको एक दिन या 2 दिन के लिए बोला जाता है कि आप वहाँ पे रुकें, और उसके बाद कहीं और जाना हो, अगर आपको नुब्रा जाना हो, पैंगोंग जाना हो, तो आप उसके बाद जाएं। तो उस वजह से भी लेह में पर्टिकुलरली होटल्स की बहुत तादाद बढ़ गई, क्योंकि अगर आप आएंगे वहाँ पे तो आपको रुकना ही है, एक दिन तो आप लेह में तो रुकोगे आप। और उसकी वजह से जो मैं इससे पहले जो मैं जिक्र कर रहा था ग्रीन एरियाज के बारे में, जो फार्म एरियाज के बारे में, वो सारे के सारे जो है वो कन्वर्ट हो चुके हैं होटल्स। आपको वहाँ पे बहुत कम एरिया ऐसा दिखेगा जो एग्रीकल्चर के लिए रखा हुआ है। तो उसकी वजह से मतलब एक फूड का जो सिस्टम है वो भी बहुत चेंज हुआ है। टूरिज्म के आने की वजह से जो फूड की डिमांड्स है वो भी बहुत अलग हो गई हैं। मतलब जब से मैंने जाना शुरू किया है और फिर उसमें ज़मीन आसमान का फर्क ऐसे भी कि हर चीज़ वहाँ पे अवेलेबल होने लगी है और हर होटल में हर चीज़ मिल जा रही है बड़ी आसानी से। और आई थिंक एक प्रॉब्लम ये भी रही है कि इंडियन टूरिज्म के साथ में या इंडियन टूरिस्ट के साथ में वी हैड नॉट बीन ट्रेन्ड हाउ टू बी अ टूरिस्ट, बिकॉज वी डिमांड एंड वी एक्सपेक्ट एवरीथिंग like at our doorstep, everything to come to us very comfortably. And we don't understand the fragile nature of that place, or we don't understand the kind of efforts that needs to be done to survive in that area or to be in that area. So हमें शायद because it has become easy to reach there, and that's why we don't understand the sensitivity or the fragile nature of that place, and we expect कि जो चीज़ें हम प्लेन्स में करते हैं, जो एक्टिविटीज हम यहाँ पे करते हैं, सेम चीज़ें वहाँ पे भी करें। तो आई थिंक ये एक प्रॉब्लम आई है। और 2010 के मैं इसलिए बोलूँगा क्योंकि वो मूवी ने काफ़ी इम्पैक्ट किया। पीपल थॉट मतलब पीपल स्टार्ट गोइंग देयर विद देयर फैमिलीज, with major chunk of people had started going there. Airport है लेह में, एक ही सिंगल एयरपोर्ट है लद्दाख में, एंड उसकी वजह से भी मतलब लेह becomes a destination जहाँ पे लोग पहुँचते हैं। और ये बड़ा मेजर फैक्टर है उसके।
I think in one of the previous episodes, we were talking with a senior environment journalist, and we were talking about the Everest base camp with regard to Khumbu Glacier, and how the Everest also now has like a trail of humans just waiting in line. And one of the media, the video that we saw is a particular person carrying water up mountains or carrying the waste down the mountain. And while it's I completely agree with what you were saying, that it seems very easy for us to bring our city culture and have that demand in the mountains, but it presents challenges as well. However, we are seeing these urbanization, the space is urbanizing. I would assume that when you say that hotels are coming up in Leh, that you would probably agree that we would probably term it as urban spaces. It's converting into urban spaces. There is also a requirement because tourism also gets a lot of revenue for the particular city, state. However, urbanization changes the food culture, or impacts the food culture, because food from other metro cities, and well, we know the snacks and things end up in a particular city. It also damages the ecological space in a certain way. 40-50 years down the line, where do you think we would be in terms of urbanization? You can talk about Leh, and we can pick a city, a hill station of your choice. Yeah.
What do you would like to see there, or what exactly?
Based on how we are progressing, if you were to make a projection, like in terms of urbanization, the rapid pace of it, where do you think it leaves us from a climatic point of view or in terms of ecology?
I think Sir has given a very interesting word, Shimlafication, and I think Shimlafication of Leh also has started.
Oh, Shimlafication होता है क्या?
I think वो Sir बताएं तो ज़्यादा.
I don't know, I just coined it because, I saw, and this was again one of these studios. So like, I started in the beginning that, we get to learn so much by teaching that, that's the good part. So one of these studios we took to Shimla. And the last memory of Shimla that I had was some years before that. And it was not that urbanized in the sense that, the number of hotels, the density of buildings along the slope of the ridge was not that much. But when I went there, and this was I think 2014 or 15 or so, at that point of time, I was surprised to see that not even like I said, that not even a square inch of land was vacant. Everything was built up along the slope. And that is what I thought that, okay, this is not done. You cannot build so much despite knowing that this is the highest earthquake hazard zone. And you cannot build hotels or buildings which are 4, 5, 6 stories high on a slope where, we don't know how good is the foundation or the structure of it. And so this is something which I don't know how, but I coined the term Shimlafication because this pattern is being repeated in almost all the hill stations in the country. And the reason is primarily an increase in the tourism. So all the hill stations are kind of, they are expanding. They are basically, they are building in those areas which were not built earlier, which were not supposed to be built earlier. And the thing is that originally, if you look at the buildings, if you go there, you still find some of the buildings which were 30, 40, 50 or 100 years old. They were 1 or 2 stories high. They were built in timber, traditional material or so. Now, at the very same site, you will find buildings which are 6 stories high, built in concrete, something similar to a hotel in a plane. So this is something which I understand as, if you ask, application. And Intekhab, I think very rightly said that if you take the example of Leh as well. So last time when I went there, it was in 2012, again in our studio with the students. And we had a wonderful experience living in homestay. So at that point of time, if I remember, there were barely 3-4 hotels. And they were very small hotels. The rest of it was all homestays. You were made to stay with the people there. So it used to be run and operated by a family, a native family. And in the morning when you used to wake up, you had the choice of, getting aloo ka paratha and mooli ka paratha, which was dug out from the agricultural field right in front of the guest house. And you had the choice of getting yak, milk ka chai, and yak is there.
Right.
So that auntie who used to run this facility, she was very nice. She used to ask us, "Beta, kaun sa wala paratha hai? Aloo ka ya mooli ka?" Wahi wo hamare samne, she used to dig it out right practically in front of our eyes. And in the morning, they had a small orchard of apples. This was in September when we went, and I think this is the time when the harvest for apples happened there. And all my students used to go there, and they used to at least pick 5 kgs of apples, and that's how they started, their meal of the day. So this was an experience which is beyond the experience of living in a 5-star hotel in Leh. Now, when I hear from Nisar, because he used to go there almost every year, I am totally surprised, and I can't, I'm afraid to go there again and see the changes. So the number of hotels that have come up recently and the type of hotels that have come up recently is something that you can experience those hotels in Shimla or elsewhere. Why do they Leh, which used to be such very distinct settlement? Back then, I have myself experienced this and done it, that you can actually drink water from the streams which used to flow from the glaciers and used to run through the city of Leh. You could just fill your bottle of water. It used to be so clean.
अब नहीं कर सकते?
आई थिंक नहीं कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि अभी इतना टूरिज्म है तो वो चिप्स का पैकेट, पानी का बॉटल, वो सब वहाँ पर फेंका जा रहा है. I think this is something which will gradually pollute, and one of the things which is also important to understand is that when 5-star hotels or big hotels come to a place, they also bring the sewerage system. And when sewerage system comes, it somehow ends in these water bodies. And obviously the pollution starts. So back then in 2012, I remember when we were living in this homestay, it used to have a flushed toilet system, although conventionally made, it is a dry toilet system which is there. But it was not connected to a sewerage system. So it was still a decentralized waste system, perhaps a septic tank or so. But this is effective only on a smaller scale when you have homestays or bed and breakfast facilities. The moment you have a 5-star hotel with, let's say, 50 rooms or 100 rooms or so, you cannot manage it with a septic tank or something. You have to have a sewerage network. And sewerage network somehow it ends up polluting this water. You cannot now perhaps drink the water.
Right.
And so this is something which I understand as Shimlafication.
So two things from this, from what I also takeaways from what you just said, is that one, this Shimlafication is actually imparting a very similar character to all of these places, which is in fact leading to a loss of that indigenous, traditional knowledge, wisdom, or the way the people have been living in these places, commodification. And the second thing, that with the coming of these kind of tourism-related infrastructure, they come with collateral damage. Like they're more intensive in terms of their resource use and the kind of waste that they're generating as well. However, we know that all of these hill stations, and they also for that matter, these are very tourist places, or they've become so now. And we know that they are contributing to revenue generation. I mean, you can't stop people from going to, a place. So how do you think can we arrive at this balance, perhaps, that we're not closing down these places to tourism, but then we're also being very sensitive to the kind of ecology or the kind of environment that these places are located in? Is there a way to achieve this balance, do you think?
Okay, I will also want to elaborate on what Shimlafication meant for me when I heard for the first time. So, if you imagine the visuals of Shimla, right? What we visualize is not a hill, but a hill in which homes are there. Okay, so
Tall buildings, perhaps.
Tall buildings, and a hill covered with built and homes on that. That's my understanding of Shimlafication. Also, the fact that it has also been celebrated nowadays, seeing a hill which is covered with houses. Okay, and you might see photographs of it,
Green roofs.
So we have, unfortunately, we have started celebrating these images. Where a hill station has been covered by this built thing. So, and I think what also I meant from Shimlafication is that because the question is how we are proceeding further and how do we see these hill stations further. What we are doing, knowingly or unknowingly, whatever is coming to us, we are degrading it, and we are moving ahead of that, and we are moving up. So after
Up as in altitude.
Altitude, yes.
Yeah.
So we are moving up in the sense that we have degraded all these hill stations. Now let's go a little up. We'll degrade that also, and then we'll go up. And then it will also be what is also had happened, unfortunately, is that all these hospitality sector, they have started moving in a certain area where the building becomes very important. Okay, the way the building is, the way it should, the view from the room has become very important. I had also been designing hotels and other structures over there. So I know what the client requires. So the client's requirement is that the customer should be able to see the view sitting from the bed. Okay, and that's the kind of brief that we get. This should be, and though with our practice we try to teach and this is not the way it should be. But this is the way things are happening over there. We are actually, the way I think I told before as well, the way tourism and the tourists who are coming there, they are not coming now for the natural beauty of it. Mostly people, unfortunately, they are coming for the luxury of the hotels. Or like how standard the hotel is and then like the nature has become secondary. Okay, and this luxury comes with a cost, and I think all of us are bearing the cost. So this is one like understanding of simplification, and also because like where do I see it? I see a lot of non-native people coming to live in these areas, and without knowing, because if like Leh is right now, it has a tremendous amount of migrants coming from outside Leh. And if I including me as well, I'm also the culprit. But I also feel that we had not been taught, or we have not been designed in a manner to live in that area. What to eat, our eating habits are different, and there is a different set of settlement that has been made to for these people to live in that area. There's an entire area which was known by Wasepur, because like a lot of Bihari migrants people from Bihar would come and stay there, and it's massive. Like it's the size of like what the town is, and simultaneously there are other people who are coming from Nepal and West Bengal and UP who are coming there, and I think it's very unsustainable practice, and I see this happening a lot in the coming time, because the native people over there, they have stopped working. Money has been pouring in that area with regard to tourism, and they can afford to have people around. So I see this degradation, this kind of pattern happening over there, and the future does not look bright, like, to be very frank. But what I see also is that what I said previously, like people are moving upwards. So this has been Shimlafied. Let's go up. Let's go to Nugra. Let's go to Turtuk, and we'll do the same thing with them as well, and then we'll start moving up. And also the fact that the glaciers are melting, and we can now go to these areas where once upon a time it was difficult for us to have a settlement, but now because of what we have done to this area, we can now go and urbanize that area as well. So I think we will move upwards in the coming time. That's unfortunately the bad thing.
So about creating this balance between tourism and urbanization and economy versus policy, that argument. So I think one thing that we need to focus on is the quantity versus quality. How many tourists come and how many tourists should be allowed to come, this needs to be regulated. Now this might sound harsh because tourism is a easy industry, considering it makes quick money, and that is why it has a charm for even the natives or the people who there and do business. But if we actually focus on the quality tourism, then we can generate similar amount of revenue, similar amount of money, without actually putting too much of pressure on the environment. Now, this we can understand from a situation where, let's say it's Leh again, and there is an increased demand for tourism. There are more and more people going. This will create a situation where more and more hotels will be built. Now, during the off-peak season, or a season where not many tourists are there, these hotels will choose to advertise lower tariffs. They'll invite more people. And this becomes a cycle. So now more people are coming, and then there is a speculation and more hotels are being built to a level then that it becomes very unsustainable, even financially, even economically. So this is something which if you ask me, I think that we need to focus on the quality tourism. So we need to understand how much is the carrying capacity of the place, and then we have to somehow see to it that that carrying capacity is kind of optimum. It's enough to generate livelihood for the people. it's not something which is depriving people of economic opportunities, but it should not simultaneously impact the environment in a much adverse manner.
Can you define carrying capacity for us?
Yeah, so I think for me this situation is something similar to the story of golden goose. Right. So what happens is that when we go to hills or mountains, the reason why we are going is because of the nature and ecology. पहाड़ है, हरियाली है, पेड़ है, बर्फ है, इसके लिए जाते हैं. But this is actually the urbanization that is resulting because of this tourism is actually killing that nature out. So we need to understand, how many tourists can a place carry in terms of the resources that are required to support them, the water that they are going to need, the electricity that has to be provided to them, the waste that they are going to generate, how much of it is actually required. That is something which is determined by carrying capacity. So if we keep adding to the infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, hotels and all, we are trying to increase the carrying capacity.
Right.
But when we do that, we create adverse impact on the environment and economy, which is the reason why people are coming there. So it does not really make sense. So carrying capacity is something which is kind of optimum capacity of a place, without where the needs are met locally, and without impacting the environment adversely. So I think that is something which we should actually focus on.
Perhaps use that as a planning tool for these places.
Well, I'd like to first thank both of you for joining us for this particular podcast. I've been taking some notes while you were talking because I couldn't help myself but write down particular statements that you had mentioned during the podcast, the episode. I think urbanization is something that is very difficult to quantify. These are the learning that I've taken back through the episode. It's very difficult to quantify, measure, but we are very, I would say, in lack of a better word, obsessed with wanting to define something as urban and something to be defined as not urban. But it's so difficult for us to define it, but yet we try to do it so hard. In the current context, in the IHR, what we are seeing is that tourism in general is spreading into ecologically sensitive areas. And did mention about Chandigarh's history of expansion to a sprawl model into other cities that we have a city name now, but it's actually the sprawl effect from Chandigarh, how it was initially planned and how it is right now. And similarly, the conversations regarding Leh and Shimla, how they were initially planned and where we stand currently. And I think if you think about the indigenous practices with respect to how this was done during the British era with the Indian indigenous practices, we do see that hill stations were built at very strategic points, and we had areas where were particularly demarcated for reasons that would enable trade, climatic conditions, administration, and safety from hazardous conditions, hazardous or disasters. So there is some method to this, I would say, madness of urbanization that we should imbibe. However, we are also, like our hill stations are also bound by economic incentives. However, we are at a current place where the intersection of economy and ecology is at a very dangerous point, where balancing the two almost feels like you can never do that. But there is a way to do that, and like we concluded with the carrying capacity, that we could perhaps identify how much a particular geographical area can hold and limit that. So I think there's a lot of learning that came through this particular podcast, and I'll just like to say that Jani Dushman ho ya fir hum jigri yaar, I hope we do find a way to visit Leh in a more sustainable manner, visit our hill stations in a more sustainable manner, while ensuring that we visit these places, but also taking care of their local traditions and the ecology itself. Thank you very much for joining us for the Parvat Manthan podcast. It was extremely engaging, and I hope the viewers also enjoyed themselves watching this.